Hello, my name is Ilona and I want to talk about the wounded child. But first, I want to start talking about the infiltration by the dark forces. I know there are many perspectives how they infiltrated and why they infiltrated. I'm not going to go into that in this video, but they have, and they started manipulating humanity. They wanted our energy, they wanted to use our energy so they could create what they wanted. So they started to manipulate, lie, infiltrate, change things. They started to create their poisonous systems, the systems we are still in. They started creating the financial system, they started creating the healthcare system, all these systems, the media, trying to program people, try to keep them in a lower frequency. So obviously they stimulated this. And so many centuries, people were obviously raised in a certain way, of course, depending on what area, but they started infiltrating that as well. They want dysfunctional people because dysfunctional people are not in touch with their soul and are very easy to manipulate. So they brought out all these books about raising children and of course changing sometimes. You know, you have the very strict raising that you have to make sure that people, how to say, the children obey you, because of obviously if you raise a very obedient child, then as a grown-up they will be very obedient as well. They have all these different way of raising, bringing out to confuse people. So they would bring out books that you have to let go of everything, you have to not give any boundaries to a child, so a child would grow up completely without a base as well, because children need boundaries, they need something to work with. And if you just let them be all the time and don't give them any support, don't give them anything to fall back on, you know, you have these parents that let their children completely decide everything. You will raise children without a true basis, who really don't know who they are, because they've never, you raise a child by showing them boundaries. So they can understand their own boundaries and they can understand how far they can go. And of course, they need the support of their mother, their father. So they made sure with all these different techniques to keep people dysfunctional. And obviously they're using it, you know, you have these organizations now that help out and that place children in another organization, things like that, with of course their agenda, not to help the family or the child, but because they have completely different plans with the child and with the family. So you have to understand this has been going on for a very long time. They infiltrated humanity, humanity let it happen for whatever reason. There are, like I said, many perspectives why this has happened, but it has happened. So we have to realize they're like infiltrated everywhere. And they've been manipulating and changing and programming us for a very long time. Just like the educational system doesn't help us in how to deal with our emotions or deal with our feelings, which would be very necessary. But they made sure that there's the focus on only the intellectual part, to make a disbalance, obviously, the focus on the masculine, the suppression of the feminine. They purposely did this to keep us in a disbalance so we would be easier to manipulate. They can do way more things with us because we are not in a stable position. So I want to mention that it's way deeper than people most of the time understand. We've been infiltrated on every level. So that's important to understand. The wounded child, well, when you are in a dysfunctional family, usually you will get those patterns. When your parents have no idea how to handle their emotions, how to deal with feelings, how to deal with other things. We, of course, the suppression of the female, I've mentioned it before. In my family, females were second-hand people. They were not important. They had just to shut up and do their thing. That's it. The men were very dominant and in control. So you have that as well. That's how I was raised. And you know, you can't really blame them. They were raised that way as well. But you have to kind of separate that. So your parents are raised in a certain way, and usually if they're not conscious on how they raise their children or change things in themselves, they will just raise you in the same way they were raised. They won't question it. So you're raised in a family with not a lot of understanding, maybe even physical things going wrong, could be emotional neglectance. That's a very important thing. I've noticed in consultations that a lot of people were raised, you know, they were fed, they had their clothing, they had a roof above their head, things like that, but there was no emotional support. Their parents didn't really care or didn't know how to handle their needs. So their needs were not that important. And of course, that the message is that you are not important. And many people raised that way are all very adaptable. So they're always adapting to everything around them because that's what they were taught to do. They had to adapt to their parents. Very pleasing. So they are not aware how to put boundaries towards people, certain situations. So they have a very tough time saying no to things because they just had to accept things. No one was listening to what they needed. Or they can go completely the different way. That's also possible. Depends on the character, that they will be forcefully putting down boundaries, pushing everyone away. You know, there are many things and many ways of handling that situation. But they all have that damaged child, the child that wanted the love of their parents, that wanted the support, that wanted the attention or recognition. It can be all kinds of things. So the grown-up has that part in him or her. And every time something triggers, something happens, I've noticed that myself lately in certain situations. And it's very important to understand. So if you're triggered, and you feel like almost like losing control. That's how I will describe. So this is my personal experience, that if I feel like I start to get very restless, and in my situation I want to fix it. And then I start focusing very much on the person or what the person was saying or what was the situation. And I start to, well, this is interesting. I start to get into my head. So I want to control things. So I'm like, how do I fix things? How do I fix things? And I get very restless. There were some situations lately, not very deep situations, but interesting situations, that I was just looking or feeling in myself. I feel very anxious or very restless. I want to fix things. I want to do something about it. What is going on? So that's a very good indication if you feel like something's going on inside yourself that you do not fully explain, and you feel like you are losing control in a way, especially this child part in you. If it gets triggered, it will feel like it's the end of the world. It feels like overwhelming. It of course depends on what's being triggered, but if it's triggered something that goes very deep, you will feel like you have no control because the child didn't have any control. So that's a way of recognizing this. And it's important that you start recognizing that, because then you can start working with that. Of course, many times it will happen that afterwards you're like, well, what happened? Why did I act this way? It's almost like you cannot get out of it. I'm not sure if I completely explain it, but it's like you're being taken over by something else. You can get very childish. You can feel like a complete victim. That's a part of the wounded child. Like you don't know what to do anymore. You can feel like a panic or restless, but it's very, very deep, and it's almost like you cannot get back to your adult self. It's almost like you've forgotten that you're an adult and you can make different choices. So it's very important, just maybe even afterwards, to realize, oh, this has happened, because then you can look back. Well, what was going on? What triggered me? What was the trigger? Was it something because someone did not respect my needs? Was it because someone just stepped over my boundaries? Just look at the situation. What's going on? What triggered me, and how did I react? Did I react in a panic? Did I got very angry or very frustrated? I can suddenly get very angry as well, and then I'm like, okay, this is a child part. This is an old part of me. There's nothing wrong with anger. Just, anger, if you feel in the moment, is a way of putting your boundaries up. So something's going on and you can get angry, but if you remain in that anger and you just get frustrated, it's a very deep feeling and it's almost like you cannot get through this anger, then it's really an old part in you. And it's very important to see this, to find this in yourself, because if you understand your triggers, you can understand and work with it. You can look back at how you were raised. Why do you react this way? Why is it so difficult for you to put up boundaries? And you can go back to that part in that child, that damaged child in yourself, and start healing this. Because if you try to fix it in the moment, you're being triggered and you start maybe getting very angry and frustrated and just ranting, you're not going to get rid of it. You're not really helping it. You're just letting out all this pain on people around you that really have nothing to do with that. They maybe the trigger said something, but you're overreacting to it. Usually it's something happening that is completely not related to what happened in your youth, but you're reacting to that thing because it reminds you of that. That's why you have to heal this in your past by looking back at what happened in my past and giving a voice to that damaged child. That's why it's so important to energetically heal it. Usually it doesn't help at all to even just talk to your parents now. Most of the time, if your parents still alive, they are maybe still living the way they have been from, when they were raising you. So most of the time they have no clue if you come out, yeah, I want your recognition, you should have done this. They'll be like, what? They won't be able to handle that. And they won't be able to help you with that. So it's very important that we take responsibility of this child part ourselves. We shouldn't look outside ourselves anymore. We are now the mature adult and we are going to take care of that part in ourselves. So we will not be depending on other people to give us this respect or give us this support or give us what we still want from our parents, because that's what this is about. We really have to understand that this child part is still wanting something. And they're still wanting it from maybe partners that will remind them of their parents one way or another, or something outside of them, or maybe just life in general. They want that recognition, they want that understanding, they want that love, but they're not going to get it if you do not deal with this part. You have to start healing it. You have to give that part in yourself what it missed. So if you missed understanding or emotional support, it's now the time to give that to that wounded child. And you can do that by watching maybe even some pictures from when you were growing up. Really get in touch with that child, get in touch with what you needed at the moment and start giving it to the child. So you are bringing it back into balance. And when you're balanced, the more you do this, and it is a process. It is a process, and sometimes something repeats itself because you have to heal it on a deeper level, but it's a process. And when you're into that process, the stronger you will get. First, it will be very uncomfortable because you're going to do something. Your system has no idea what you're doing. Because usually you have this wounded child that will come up once in a while or maybe all the time. Some people live from that wounded child. They're completely in, maybe in being a victim or completely in their frustration or their anger. I'm sure you know people that are angry all the time or a victim all the time or always sad and in a negative space. These people are living from that wounded part of themselves. So it's very important that we deal with that wounded part, and that you see how it comes up in your life, what's happening. Usually it's a feeling of that you're out of control, or later when you look back at it, you're like, why did I act this way? It was so out of control, or so things like that. When you feel like this trigger, and you will be more and more aware, you will become more and more aware of it, then a certain point in time you will be aware of it in the moment. And then you can make a decision, will I continue with this, or will I start looking at this from my own, from healing myself. So it's very important to be aware when you're being triggered, how your damaged child or the damaged part is working. So there are many ways. I just mentioned a few. If you become aware of it, you can start healing it. And it's very important that you start working with that part by maybe writing down things, or visualizing your inner child, your wounded child. Start talking with it. There are many ways. See what's suitable for you. It's also possible just to feel what comes up. So if it doesn't feel right to you to like connect with the child, just if something's triggered, just withdraw yourself and see where do you feel that in your body, and just breathe through that feeling. Because usually it just feelings that are stuck, or emotions in that part, and you growing up, something happens, you're not allowed to express it fully. That's usually the problem, because your parents have no idea of how to handle it. So they just push you aside, or tell you not to do something about that, or you already are in a situation that you're like, I can't express this, I cannot show my anger or my sadness, or whatever it is. It stays stuck in your energy. It's not expressed. So you can do that now as an adult by feeling that, especially when you're triggered, it's the same emotion. And of course, in the beginning, if it's something really deep, you can get overwhelmed. So take your time with that. You don't have to start feeling everything immediately. So usually your system is not used to that either. So take your time in that. Give yourself time to embrace that part of yourself. But it is time for us to really deal with that. And obviously, people around us will be triggered and will be connecting to their damaged child, and will just project things onto us or people around them. That it's very important that you are connected to yourself, so you can decide what to do in that situation. Maybe it's better to just walk away if someone acts like that towards you, so you can get back later and talk to this person about this, and if they want to change or not, because you do not have to tolerate that kind of behavior. Someone is very angry, they have a very angry, damaged child, and every time something happens that they don't like, they start getting angry. That person will need to start healing and deal with it. And if that person decides not to do that, then it's up to you what you're going to do if you want to keep connecting with this person, because you will know sooner or later that they will project onto you again. So you will have to make sure to put up boundaries and protect yourself, and maybe even just move away from this person. So it's very important that we all start healing that damaged child, the pain in ourselves, heal this shadow, because the more we will heal it, the more balanced we are, and the more balanced we are, the less likely we will be manipulated. We will see through things, we will be connected to our soul, and we will understand what's going on. And we can really feel what is right for us and which actions are right for us. And then we will, of course, attract people that are like-minded and will treat us, obviously, with respect as well. Because you balance things out with yourself. You will treat yourself with respect. You will give yourself the love that you really needed. You will give yourself the respect. You will treat yourself with respect. You will attract people that will treat you with respect, and you will attract situations that will reflect that as well. So this is very important. I want to leave it at this. I hope to see you in another video. Bye.